Okay, I'm going to talk to you about using the subjunctive to express doubt and denial. I had just made this video and wasn't actually recording where I needed to be, so I'm going to do it again so you can already see some of the writing out here. But the subjunctive is used in the dependent clauses after expressions of doubt, uncertainty, or denial. So basically, what's going on there is when you see these verbs, dudar, negar, no pensar, no creer, no estar seguro de, es dudoso, no es cierto, es increíble, no es verdad. If you see these verbs or expressions in your main clause and there is a change of subject, change in subject in your dependent clause, you're going to use the subjunctive mood in the dependent, which I did a great job of spelling things here. Get in here. Okay, so when you see these verbs in your main clause and there is a change in subject in your dependent clause, you're going to use the subjunctive mood in the dependent clause. So like, for example, you've got no es cierto que Camilo padezca de artritis. So you see no es cierto, which is one of these expressions of doubt or denial. There's a change in subject because it's not certain that Camilo padezca. So then there's Camilo, we're going to put it in the subjunctive. No creo que el médico sepa el diagnóstico. You've got no creo. And so in your dependent clause, you've got the subjunctive, okay? You use the indicative in the dependent clause when there is no doubt, uncertainty, or disbelief. So these guys would use the, they would all use the subjunctive mood, but if you had, I don't know if I can fit them in here, if you have the opposite of them, if you had no dudar, no negar, no pensar, oopsies, not no pensar, pensar, creer, estar seguro de, no es dudoso, es cierto, no es increíble, and es verdad. If you change all of these to the opposite, then you would use the indicative. So if you see these guys, in your main clause, you're going to use the subjunctive. Okay, and these guys over here, when you see them in your main clause, actually that's not really a different color, let's do, you're going to use the indicative. When the verb creer is used in a question, it can imply doubt in the mind of the speaker, thereby triggering the subjunctive in the dependent clause. But if the speaker expresses no opinion or does not anticipate a negative response, the indicative is preferred. So, for example, we have crees que el alcohol afecta el corazón? O crees que el alcohol afecta el corazón? So how I would interpret this is they both mean, do you think or believe that alcohol affects the heart? In the first sentence, I would say that the speaker isn't sure that he believes this and is checking with you to see, he's checking for you for confirmation, sharing with him that yes, he's asking you to convince him that alcohol affects the heart. Whereas in the second one, I read it as the speaker believes that alcohol affects the heart, and he just wants to know if you also believe with him. So in this one, he wants you to convince him that alcohol affects the heart, and here he just wants to know if you agree with him. Okay, if there's no change in subject, you can use the infinitive. So if the subject doesn't change from the main clause, the dependent clause, you can use the infinitive. And if there's no K in there, so you can use, if there's no change of subject, and I would put, and let's go back, whoops, and no K starting off the you would use the infinitive. So you've got Carlos niega tomar bebidas alcohólicas. Es increíble ver cuántas calorías tiene una hamburguesa. So Carlos denies drinking alcoholic beverages. It's unbelievable seeing how many calories a hamburger has. El subjuntivo con tal vez y quizás, these two expressions mean perhaps or maybe, and you always use the subjunctive with them, even though they don't get, there's no K that starts off your dependent clause. So when you see these expressions in your main clause, even though there is no K in the sentence, conjugate the verb in the dependent clause in the subjunctive mood. So you've got tal vez, so your verb is going to be funcione. Quizás el ejercicio me haga sentir mejor. You're going to use the subjunctive. Okay, so let's practice. We're going to focus mainly right here. Actually, okay, and we're only really wanting to pay attention to this right now. Get that a little better. Okay, so if we see these expressions in our main clause, we're going to put the verb in the indicative form. And if we see these in our main clause, we're going to conjugate our verb into the subjunctive form. So let's do this activity. Dudo que ella, we've got dudo here, dudo que, dudo falls over here, so we're going to use the subjunctive and we're going to conjugate for ella, and you can see there's a change in subject. I doubt that she lifts weights at the gym, so we're going to do levante. El profesor está seguro de que sus estudiantes entendieron su puntivo. He is sure that seguro de que falls over here with the indicative. Estar seguro de. So we're going to put it in the indicative form. Mi tío niega que él y su esposa blank ricos. So negar falls under the subjunctive. So we're going to put sean. No creo que ellos. No creer falls under the subjunctive. No creer que ellos. You're going to conjugate for ellos. Lleguen a las 8. No estamos seguros de que. No estar seguro de que falls under the subjunctive. So, sepa. Miguel no niega. No negar, you would use the indicative. Manuel no niega que necesita comer mejor. Creemos que. Creer falls under the subjunctive. So, creemos que nuestra sobrina tiene gripe. El doctor duda que ella, dudar falls under subjunctive. So, el doctor duda que ella se mejorará. se mejore pronto. Ellos niegan que, negar falls under subjunctive, que su hijo vaya de vacaciones. No estoy segura de que. So no estar seguro falls under the indicative. So we would say, no estoy segura de que el médico me, and it's to give, and who's doing the giving is the doctor. He's giving the prescription to me. So it would be de. Cristina no piensa, no pensar falls under the subjunctive. So Cristina no piensa que haya. And creo que, creer falls under the indicative. So you do creo que le duele la garganta a Sarita. And it's duele because what hurts is the garganta. That's for whom you're conjugating. Okay, so let's do another one. Let's do the tal vez quizás. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this activity. This time we're going to use tal vez and quizás. So no estoy segura, no estoy seguro, pero quizás el antiácido, and we're going to put the subjunctive because we have quizás. Ayude a aliviar el dolor de estómago. And what's helping is the antacid, so that's for whom you're conjugating. Tal vez hacer buen tiempo mañana. Tal vez haga buen tiempo mañana. And it's haga because you always do it's the weather that's going to be good, so you're conjugating for weather. Nosotros ir al cine quizás el viernes. Well, quizás is over here, so nosotros vamos al cine quizás el viernes. Tal vez lo sepa Clara. Quizás usted pueda solucionar el problema. Tal vez Miguel deje de fumar este año. Tal vez ustedes quieren hacer una excursión hoy. Quizás tú tengas a los mariscos. Nosotros debemos hacer una cita al doctor quizás. Tal vez el doctor me recete un antibiótico. Okay, so I just wanted to point out one thing, that if your statement, if quizás or tal vez is part of your sentence, you're definitely going to use the subjunctive. But if you have a statement, like there's a couple that I use, like nosotros, here you put a comma. If you have a comma and then you have quizás or tal vez, it's not really part of your statement, so you're not going to use the subjunctive in that scenario. So if quizás or tal vez are part of the main sentence, you're going to put the verb in question into the subjunctive. But if it's as an afterthought, like we should make an appointment with the doctor, perhaps. If you've got a comma, that's separating it from your main sentence, and you do not use the subjunctive in that scenario. And I think there was another one. Yeah, nosotros vamos al cine quizás el viernes, because there's a comma, and then we've got the quizás. So like we're going to the movies, comma, perhaps on Friday. So in that scenario, you don't need to use the subjunctive, but all the other ones where it's before the verb, then you do.